Hello and welcome to our Advent Life Church YouTube page. My name is Tiago. I am the pastor here at Advent Life Church in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's a joy to welcome you into our virtual church experience here this week. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 cases are still on the rise in our city and in our state. And this means that for this week and probably the next week, our building will still be closed. But again, that does not mean that our ministry, our service to the community is closed as well. No, everything else continues just the same. So please reach out if you'd like to participate in any of our online gatherings or in the opportunities to serve throughout the week. So very good. This week we continue our journey through the Gospel of Matthew. And as I told you last week, one of the three scenes that we were starting to read about in Matthew 26 was left for this week. So that is what we will do today. But before we do so, let me do a little review, and then we can start together. Obviously, I need to pause here and just say that it was a very difficult week for our community here in Santa Fe and in Los Alamos. There are beloved church members who are experiencing difficult challenges in the area of health who need our prayers. And again, it's been an overwhelming week for us knowing about these things, and we cannot imagine what they are all going through. And this not to mention as well some other things that are happening in our community that I might bring up in our message today. But please, let's keep one another in prayer. Let's keep a beloved family in our Los Alamos church in prayer as they are facing these difficult challenges. And I wish my job, I wish our experience as a community here in Santa Fe and Los Alamos did not have to face these things that sort of weigh upon our heart and our mind, but this is life, and it is good that we can walk through it all together in the hope that God is moving and working in the areas where we are unable to act and do anything. So with these things in mind, again, it's always a joy to prepare the messages for you every week, to continue on our journey through the Gospel of Matthew. But again, this is just a small piece of what we do every week together. The stories, the faces, the different things that happen on a day-by-day basis. That's the bulk of it all. So today is just a moment where we pause and we reflect upon Jesus, what He did in the example He sets for us. So let's go into it. Last week we began reading Matthew chapter 26, and we discovered right at the beginning of the story that Jesus announces His death once again to His disciples who are silent. And the first scene of the story is a secret gathering, a secret meeting. The religious elite, they meet in secret to plan and plot with the goal of having Jesus killed. And we learned that if Matthew added this secret scene into his narrative, he had an intention. And the intention was probably to remind the church of the danger of allowing people who love to make politics in the shadows, who are more worried about public opinion and public perception of them more than the public itself and their needs. So Matthew is reminding the church of the danger of allowing these people to occupy positions of leadership. And I believe this is a lesson that the Christian church throughout the world, America, has yet to learn for sure. We also learned, that was the main bit of our study last week, about an unnamed woman who became a living reminder of what true discipleship looks like. While the disciples remained silent at the words of Jesus concerning His death, while their dreams and visions about their positions in the kingdom with Jesus sitting on the throne were melting away, this woman heard the words of Jesus and acted upon them. Not only that, what she did was the gospel. This is what Jesus says. Wherever this gospel is announced, she will be remembered. And the fact that her example of acting upon the words of Jesus is not a pillar of the Christian proclamation of the gospel reveals a lot about our Christianity, about what matters to us Christians. It reveals how far we still are, how we are not far from the religion of the 12, a religion that did not make room for the gifts and the wisdom of the women Jesus brought to the center of His project. And as I told you, that will become more evident in these last chapters. Christian church is still largely incapable of giving the proper weight to the things Jesus pointed out as crucial. What she did is a central piece in what the gospel is all about. And here we sit in a denominational situation where women are still not able to be ordained into ministry. But I'm not going to go into that today. As we proclaim the gospel of the kingdom here at Advent Life Church, we will remember that unnamed woman and every other woman who has expanded the kingdom through word and deed here in Santa Fe and Los Alamos. My dear sisters who are listening to me wherever you are seen, valued, and loved, and we are all better because of you, your witness, your service. So that's just a review. Today we're going to go into the last 3 verses here of this first section of the chapter. But before we get there, I want to do something different today. I want to tell you a story that you have all heard before. I'm going to read you the story. I'm not a great storyteller. Although I read to the kids every night and they seem to enjoy it. But the story I'm going to read about today is the story of a boy called Joseph. My kids know the story. You've all heard the story. Joseph, the boy who was betrayed by his own brothers. This story is found in the book of Genesis. So if you were already there in Matthew, go back to the first book of the Bible. In our Bible here at church, I'm reading from the English Standard Version, page 28. Genesis chapter 37. First book of the Bible, chapter 37. We will read from verse 1 all the way to verse 28. So if you have children at home, kids, it's story time. I'll try to make it dramatic for all of you not to be too bored, but please follow along with me as we read a piece of the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. So Genesis chapter 37, verse 1. Jacob lived in the land of his father's sojournings, in the land of Canaan. And these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, remember those days, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now, little insight here for all of us readers. Verse 3, Israel, who was Jacob, loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. So Joseph made him a robe of many colors, a sign of prestige, a sign of love, a sign of that higher status of Joseph, the son of his old age. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Now we know what this looks like, yes? When there is envy, when there is, preferences within the home, how that can disrupt the relationship, and we're unable to speak peacefully to one another. We've seen it before. This story is very close to home. We know what it is. Verse 5. Now Joseph, wearing probably his colorful robe, had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I have dreamed, brothers. Behold, we were all binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down before my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Or are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. So not only did they hate him because the father liked him better, now there's more hate going around. This time for his dreams and for his words. Verse 9, then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him. But his father kept all of these words from Joseph, all of these dreams in his mind. And a little insight into the book of Genesis here. You know, Abraham, the father of all of these guys here, he was a dreamer. He had dreams. Jacob himself had dreams of stairs, of angels going up and down. So Joseph started having dreams, and this is part of the family tradition. The boy is not guilty for sharing something that is so special to the family. This ability to have dreams and insights into reality, into what will be. So Jacob was puzzled, the father of Joseph. The brothers infuriated. Verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." So he said to him, "And go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word of what's happening over there, because last time I know it was a bad situation altogether." So Jacob sent him from the valley of Hebron, and Joseph came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking, boy?" "I am seeking my brothers," Joseph said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And this anonymous man said, "They have gone away, for I have heard him say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Verse 18, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of the hand to restore him to his father." So Reuben tried with his brothers there to save the boy. Verse 23, so when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, the sign of favor of the father, took him off, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Well, there you have it, my friends. Story that you know very well. Sorry for reading 28 verses to you, but I just wanted you to be reminded of this old story about Joseph, who ended up being sold to these travelers, these traders who take him to Egypt. And in Egypt, you know the story, right? He goes on to be a slave in one of the Pharaoh's officials' house. There's trouble there with the wife. Even though he's a good man, there's a lot of deception happening. He goes down again, not into a pit, but into a prison. And years later, he comes out and becomes a ruler. He goes up to the palace and becomes a ruler beside the king, the Pharaoh himself. This is before the story of the Exodus. This is how the book of Genesis ends. Now, question is why? Why did I decide to read you this story today? Well, my friends, because as we approach the final scenes of the life of Jesus, Matthew will use numerous allusions to the Old Testament to help us understand not only what happened, but the meaning of what happened. Joseph the dreamer was loved by the father and hated by his brothers who plotted to kill him, but ended up deciding to sell him to traders. And the echoes of the story of Joseph to the life and experience of Jesus are many. In fact, we'll see more as we move forward. Jesus being stripped of his clothes before being crucified. There's a lot of imagery going around. So when we remember what we have already read in chapter 26, we are already able to see other interesting similarities. Think of verses 3 and 4 of chapter 26 that read, "The chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him." Interesting. There's no way to read this episode and not think of Joseph being betrayed by his own brothers, by his own people, who plotted secretly to kill him. But there's more. Our text today is the continuation of the story of the unnamed woman who exemplifies true discipleship, responding to the words of Jesus as she prepares him for burial. So let's read that right now. Matthew chapter 26, verse 14, all the way to 16. That's our text for today. 3 little verses. So let's get going. Verse 14. Then one of the 12, one of the greatest evil characters in human literature altogether, one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests, those who were part of the secret gathering plotting to kill Jesus. Judas went to them and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. Joseph, you hear the echo, sold for 20 pieces of silver. Jesus, 30 pieces of silver, both betrayed by a brother, by somebody within an intimate circle of family, of brotherhood. And from that moment on, he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now, the Bible doesn't give us the intentions of Judas. This has puzzled many authors over the centuries. Why somebody so close to Jesus, somebody who had seen everything that Jesus had done, how would that person be capable of doing such an abominable act? So we don't know. We don't know if Judas also, like the woman, listened to the words of Jesus. But instead of following Jesus as the woman all the way to the grave, Judas realized that his many plans to become something in the kingdom of Jesus were about to be frustrated. So it's not that he didn't listen to Jesus, he did. But instead of following Jesus toward the path of death and resurrection, Judas decided to go to the other side. He decided to follow those who might not lose their power now because of Jesus' death. So Judas possibly tried to position himself with those who seemed to be the winners, who seemed to be the ones who would continue to control the imagination and power of the people. They would continue to lord over the people. So, friends, why am I putting all of these stories together? Joseph, Jesus, Joseph's brothers, Judas. Why? 3 short reasons, and then we shall wrap this up so you can go back to normal life, hopefully with new ways of looking at the world and your place in it. 3 things I think about when I look at the story of Joseph, of Jesus, how Matthew sort of allowed these images to come forth in his story so that we would make these connections. Why? Number 1, keys. We must understand how the betrayal of Joseph is obviously similar to the betrayal of Jesus. We read of coins of silver, we see the hate, the jealousy, the intimacy that enhances the brokenness of this image of betrayal because of the intimate setting it takes place in. But we must not remain in despair. By using allusions to the story of Joseph, Matthew is not only describing what is happening, but he is giving the church and all of us the keys to anticipate what is happening, to interpret not only what happens to Jesus, but the meaning of what happens. So Joseph was sold. We know the story. He was sold to the traders. And as I told you, after a while, he was thrown in prison and raised from that dark pit to serve beside the king himself, offering bread and life to all who were hungry. So you know the story. His brothers come back to Egypt. There is a famine over the land, and Joseph is the one responsible to offer the bread that will give life, not only to Egypt, but to all of the nations. Interesting. It is as if Matthew is giving the church the keys to understand that the experience of Joseph will be the experience of Jesus. Jesus will also be betrayed. Yes, it's horrible, but we know that even though he's going to be betrayed, sold, imprisoned, killed, and buried in the ground, that he will also be raised as Joseph to sit beside the Father to offer life to all who believe. It is as if the story of Joseph anticipates what will happen to Jesus. As Joseph goes down and then up, so this will happen to Jesus. So for now, you can only see the betrayal in Judas. But that betrayal signals the possibility that the rest of the story will also be true. That Jesus, as Joseph, will also be exalted and will be the source of bread and life to all who are hungry. What a beautiful thing. The Old Testament anticipating what happens in Jesus. So that's number 1. Matthew gives us keys in these parallels, and that's why I wanted to go back to Genesis for a little bit so you could see it for yourselves. Number 2, all of this can get very theological, very abstract, very literary. Okay, there are echoes, there are allusions. How beautiful. Amen. Let's go home. No. Number 2, let's talk about us, our existence. In doing these allusions and connections, Matthew is also giving the church and all of us a way to interpret our own life, our own experiences. The Bible exists to shape our imagination, to allow us to see in the events of our own life echoes of stories and events that are able to give us wisdom in a path ahead. The Bible gives us a path to find commonality in fellowship with other people who have been broken, who have suffered, and who found the end of their stories in the experience of Jesus, even if they did not live to see it themselves. So as we have the Bible in our hands, why do we read it? So that we can say, oh, this is a verse. Go and do this, and then you go and do that. We've talked about this before. No, the Bible works at the level of the imagination so that we can see patterns, so that we can see things happening to others and allow their stories to shape our own, to notice the mistakes, to notice the good things, and to position ourselves in the world in such a way that these stories give us wisdom to know where our own stories lead. So yes, as we read the Bible, we find community with a bunch of broken people. This family situation of Joseph, I might stop and do a whole series just on the cycle of Joseph and talk about family. So many lessons to be learned there. So many truths that are still relevant to our experience today. So the Bible has this capacity. It has the capacity to reach us now, our stories. So as you read about Judas, about Jesus, about the unnamed woman, what have we been doing all along? We've been trying to look at these stories and see, where do we fit in them? What can we learn from them? Which brings me to my last point. I wanted to say a few words about betrayal and injustice. Because Jesus is the end of the story of Joseph, because he is the end of our story, he embraces and immerses himself in that very experience of brokenness that the biblical characters and all of us experience. Jesus experienced what Joseph and every single individual or group of people who have suffered injustice in this life have experienced. Jesus knows the path. Jesus knows the experience. Jesus knows the feeling of betrayal, of being the object of injustice. So because Jesus was the object of betrayal and injustice, he also becomes the source of hope, the source of the hunger and thirst for justice that so many of us have today. Because he is familiarized with the experience of everyone who suffered the anguish of being abandoned, forgotten, betrayed, and overlooked by justice. And as we learned in the past, true discipleship is meeting Jesus in the world where he said he would be, where he is. And if Jesus now is the one who embodies the experience of the betrayed, of those who experience injustice, then all of us now, as we are with those who experience these same things today, as we fight for them, it is as if we are with Jesus, fighting for Jesus as well. Because Jesus is the one who experienced injustice and betrayal, just like all of these Bible characters and all of the people who have and are still experiencing betrayal and injustice today. As we approach these in our world today, as we protect them, as James talks about, go visit the widows and the orphans, those who are constantly abused by society and the structures of power. Go and visit them and protect them from the corruption of the world, because that is true religion according to God the Father. As we visit them, it is as if we are meeting Jesus himself, protecting him. That is how the Bible shapes our imagination, so that when we see injustice, we respond to it, because Jesus has shown us that he is not separated from that experience himself. He embodies it to redeem it. What a source of hope for those experiencing injustice. And what a source for all of us who hunger and thirst for justice. Jesus. Fascinating. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Day last Monday. A day when Americans paused to remember the life of Dr. Martin Luther King and his work toward those who did not have the same rights as other more privileged. And while we celebrate the day, the country still does celebrate the day, it is easy to forget how he was one of the most hated people in America at the time. Why, you might ask if you have forgotten. As my friend Garrison Hayes would say, because America loves the idea of Martin Luther King, but America killed him because they hated the substance of his message. The substance, the implications of his message. So does this not also remind us of Jesus? Does this not move us to live and do what is necessary for those who currently live in conditions of injustice? To do what is necessary for them to experience the slightest sense of justice. Martin Luther King was one who spoke truth to power, was killed for it, and he is a living reminder of what Jesus experienced as he experienced betrayal and injustice himself. So as we go out into the city now, are we even aware of the places, neighborhoods, areas where injustice is not only practiced, but is the norm? Injustices toward people, injustices toward minorities, injustices toward the environment that end up creating injustices toward people and minorities. Oh, my dear friends, we love Jesus and the gospel, but do we love the substance of that proclamation and its implications? I think about those things when Martin Luther King Day comes around, and several times after that throughout the year. Not finished though. Just like Martin Luther King Day, we have just witnessed, just a week ago, last Sabbath, another attack in a Jewish synagogue in Texas. A man was welcomed into the community. And then the same man held the few congregants there hostage. And even though everyone came out of the experience, this traumatic experience, alive, we must pause to denounce these acts, these attacks, while keeping in mind that anti-Semitism still runs deep in America. How else would these things happen if it wasn't for this problem, for the shadow of this reality still being here? I tell you, every week I walk through the doors here, I open my notes and my Bible in this wooden desk, table, pulpit thing, and I speak freely to you today and every day. But my fellow rabbis here in town, they have to go up weekly to their own pulpits and congregations with uncertainty, anxiety, and fear for just being who they are. Is this just? Is this fair? What can we do? Those are a few questions. Even though I will be with my Jewish siblings this week and in the weeks to come in their congregations, showing support, reminding them that they are loved and that our community is better because of them, showing solidarity with other faith leaders here in town, there is still a long way ahead. There's still more to do. The image of that community, that Jewish community in Texas, welcoming into their fellowship the very one who would take them hostage, also reminds me of the experience of Jesus. So we must not forget, again, that these Bible stories have enormous implications for how we live now, for what we will allow to consume our imagination and our action. Community welcomes a man who ends up betraying them, as Jesus welcomes a disciple who ends up betraying him. Jesus embodied the experience of everyone who experiences betrayal and injustice today. And if we remain silent, inactive, passive, as followers of Jesus, I wonder if we ever understood anything that Jesus taught and did. And again, I'm reminded of the unnamed woman who heard the words of Jesus and acted upon them. At the time, a word about his death, so she acted upon it, preparing him for burial. But now the gospel is pointing us toward those who experience injustice. And the question is, will we act as that unnamed woman? Showing, living true discipleship in our world today, or will we keep our religion in the mansions of the mind, of the spirit, the best place where we can hide and escape the true implications of the gospel for the world today? I wonder. Again, these Bible stories have enormous implications for how we live, for what we will allow to consume our imagination and our action. Jesus is with those who experience injustice. No wonder he said, and we read it a few weeks ago, when you visited me in prison. Think about the many people in prison right now who are there for unjust reasons. Think about the statistics, the kind of people who are there for unjust reasons. So may we meet Jesus there with those who experience injustice in our city, in our country, and wherever we are. May we work for a better church, for a better faith community, for a better Santa Fe, Los Alamos, for a better America, as we see those who are experiencing injustice and meet them in that experiencing, protecting them from the corruption of the world, knowing that as we do so, we are doing those things to Jesus himself. Let's pray together. Dear God, thank you. Thank you because you remind us through Jesus of the true implications of what the gospel of the kingdom is all about. And may we live by that future vision of your kingdom now, as we restore, as we heal, as we act toward those who experience betrayal and injustice today. Participating in your act of reconciling the world back to you through Jesus. Show us the way, we pray. In the name of Jesus. Amen. My dear friends, it was a joy to spend these last few minutes with you. I hope you continue to be safe, be well, and above all things, be kind. I'll see you next week.